Anderson heaving one down the sideline, and he's got Cass Allen over the top. Big side, down the sideline. Touchdown. His signature move and his signature performance. Allen, big ball one more time. 58 yards this time.
You're listening to the Bruin Bible. This is your host, Will Decker, bringing you UCLA football content all throughout the year for LA Football Network.
What's up, Bruin Bible listeners? This is your host, Will Decker. We are brought to you today by the good people at BetOnline. It is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports, contests, and events with first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews and news for every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, such as MMA and boxing, esports, and even golf. I'm going to be placing some big-time bets this year. NFL, we're talking about Rams-Chargers Super Bowl. That's my prediction. Going to be placing some future odds on that. MLB, I might be placing a bet on the Dodgers to make the World Series as well, given the year that they've had so far in the regular season. I'm going to be using it for all my MMA bets. Loving when a good fight's coming up. The Nate Diaz fight coming up this Saturday. Going to be putting a nice wager on that through BetOnline. Head on over to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to join today and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50 to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. What is up, and welcome to a brand new edition of the Bruin Bible. Will Decker, your host, in the house. We got the Madman coming to you live from Los Angeles. He's got a hell of a weekend coming up. I'm going to let him kind of explain the marathon weekend he's going to be doing. He's not only going to be going to the Rose Bowl, he's going to be going to the Coliseum for both games. Madman, how are you doing on this fine Friday, leading into arguably the greatest expedition of college football I've ever heard in a single day?
I'm going to get my rest this evening, Will. Super excited for the weekend and so thrilled to kick off Saturday tomorrow at the Rose Bowl to see our mighty Bruins, and then heading over across town tomorrow night to see that big Fresno State SC game as well. So LAFB's got you covered for everything. The crosstown crossover, we're calling it. So hardest working man in LA, tomorrow. So it should be really fun.
It's going to be awesome. We may have him steal the social media just to kind of just document his day and what's going on there. I think that'd be kind of a fun subplot. Follow the Madman. He's going to have all the information for you when it comes to LA football at the college level tomorrow. Madman, this is a Bruins podcast. I'm happy you're going to SC, but we got to get that crap out of there when it comes to the Bruin Bible, man. Big game tomorrow. And, I have to admit, South Alabama is a school that's not really in my wheelhouse. Not a school that I was very, very familiar with. But the more I researched it, the more nervous I got as a fan of the Bruins. You mentioned the line jump from 12 to 15.5. I think it could potentially get closer than that if things were to go their way. This is an offense that is top 20 in the country right now in total offense through games, and their defense is 22nd in total defense. So, this team is very well balanced. I'm really excited to break this down with you, Madman. Let's start with the coach. Kane Womack, when he was announced as South Alabama's head coach back in 2020, he was the youngest coach in college football. He was 33 at the time. I think it was December 12, 2020, he got the job for the Jaguars. And you look at the staff, a name that I've forgotten about, Major Applewhite. This guy was a hot coaching prospect at one time, former Texas quarterback. This guy coached University of Houston. Unfortunately, it did not work out for him there. But he's coached with Mac Brown for those Texas teams that were like the last great Texas teams, leading up to the current iteration of what the Longhorns are. This guy was an offensive analyst for Nick Saban. Not everyone can get that job. And he's the OC for a team like South Alabama with a guy like Kane Womack. I'm a little daunted just looking at what the experience they have there, because these are guys that I was not expecting looking at when it came to evaluating this team.
No question about it, Thriller. We were sort of expecting to see more of the same based on what we've seen the last couple of weeks. And when you look at a name like Major Applewhite, it sort of makes you shrug a little bit and say, holy moly, this is real deal Division I. Major Applewhite was, everyone forgets, the star of the University of Texas really before Vince Young. And so he was kind of the man. He was Vince Young before Vince Young at Texas in a lot of ways. And then in his coaching career, he was Kevin Sumlin before Kevin Sumlin when, he was sort of coaching at Houston. Unfortunately, as you mentioned, that experience didn't quite work out. But some guys are sort of destined to be better coordinators than they are head coaches. And Major Applewhite has always had a tremendous mind, even when he was a quarterback. His ability to do multiple things, read defenses, call plays, make checkdowns, and that sort of transferred into his career. And anyone that's good enough for Nick Saban should be good enough for anyone else. So this is definitely a staff here that's going to be hungry, that's going to be motivated, and that's going to be very capable.
And you brought up the quarterback position because they've got this quarterback who's absolutely spinning it right now. A guy by the name of Carter Bradley, 2 games, roughly 600 yards passing, 6 touchdowns to 1 pick. That's almost an average of 300 yards a game and 3 touchdowns, like to a T right there. And Carter Bradley, this guy is not going to be intimidated, man. He went into Notre Dame last year and nearly upset the Irish that were a top 10 team in the country. This guy's played in some pretty big environments, transferred down from Toledo, took the starting job, away from the starter from last season, and is really just making a dent in this offense. And the offense for me is the area that scares me the most because they got a guy like Carter Bradley. The run game has been almost as impressive, if not more, than the pass game. LaDamian Webb, this junior tailback they have, almost averaging, 100 yards and 2 touchdowns a game on the ground. Oh, and by the way, they're stockpiling Division I transfers, the running back position. They got Omni Wells and Marco Lee from Mississippi State and Virginia Tech, respectively. This is very, very talented, a running back room as it is. So, I mean, not only can they throw it, they can they can run it, they can throw it. Give me your takes on these guys because I'm looking at this going, oh, no, just a little bit more. And UCLA, just before I give it back to you, we've struggled with these guys under Chip Kelly's era. The first game of the Chip Kelly era, who did we play? We played Cincinnati. I think it was like Desmond Ritter's first career start. We ended up losing to them. Fresno State has been a pain in our ass as fans of UCLA. It's the out of conference, that one team that is not Power 5, but still very well constructed, that has traditionally given us problems early in the season. This could be a similar situation with South Alabama, Madman.
Will, what's interesting in terms of the things that you brought up, a couple of things. Bradley is very skilled. I remember watching him last year in that Notre Dame game saying, the moment isn't too big for this kid. He's blessed with a lot of poise, and he's in a situation where he's actually got some skill here against a very formidable brand. What's fascinating to me is that through 2 games, Bradley's numbers are essentially double that of DTR's, right? 600 yards and 6 touchdowns versus 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, granted, we played a lot of folks week 2 and what have you, but I think that's sort of significant as well. And you mentioned the wide receiver depth. These are Division I Power 5 programs, Mississippi State, Virginia Tech. And so, again, you have individuals that are used to big environments, hostile environments, playing big teams. So that intimidation factor is not going to be there. And what struck to me, Will, that was actually quite significant is that if you look at UCLA's schedule and you look at South Alabama's schedule, very comparable, right? You've got Bowling Green, Alabama State on one side. You've got Nicholls State on the other with South Alabama and so
from
forth.
Michigan.
Yeah. And so they're very comparable there. But then if you double click and you look at the team statistics, if you look at points per game, points allowed, yards per game, and the yards allowed, and then the breakdown of yards per game passing and rushing, they look like mirror images of one another. If UCLA is at 45 points a game, giving up 12, South Alabama's at about 42.5 points a game, giving up 15. They're both hovering around, close to between 450 and 500 yards with an equal 50-50 split. And they're both giving up between 250 and 310 yards a game. So when you look at common schedule, essentially, in terms of quality of play, quality of opponent, and the fact that they had the same level of output, given sort of common opponents, it really makes you wonder, hey, we could have a really competitive game on our hands, and it could even be sporty to have the line be as high as 15.5 as it is currently going into tomorrow at 11 a.m.
It's tough. There's a lot of areas where UCLA's got to clean it up. I mean, we talked about the offensive line in week number 1. We were a 100-point favorites, last week. So it wasn't much of a concern, against a team that was coming in there that, really didn't have a chance to win. We got to see it. We got to see it play out this week with the offensive line. I need to see improvement if UCLA is going to get it done. And, the receiving room, they had a guy in Jalen Tolbert last year that got drafted by the Cowboys. He left. They're still deep at the receiving core. Another Jalen, they swapped one Jalen out for another. Jalen Wayne is averaging close to 100 yards a game and 2 touchdowns. Like, they have ballers. They have guys that can go out and make plays. UCLA, I mentioned the offensive line, man. The defense, this is going to be a huge, huge game for UCLA. But let's switch it to the defense for South Alabama. I mean, Kane Womack is more of the defensive mind to the Major Applewhite, who is the offensive mind. This team, we talked about the transfers on the offensive side of the football. They got a transfer from Nathan Rollins Kabange from Oklahoma, who's a defensive end, and James Miller from Indiana. Some Power 5 transfers in here. So they are getting some guys that, were coveted by other places. AJ DeShazer, he has an interception this year, led the team in tackles last year, is coming back, going to be making some plays. Oh, and their secondary, I mean, they got Daryl Luter, who was a first-team all, Sun Belt secondary player. He's going to get some looks at the NFL at the very least for what he was able to do. Defense, I mean, I mentioned they're top 22. They're the 22nd ranked team in the country in total defense. What does UCLA's offense need to do? The tone they may need to set, Madman, when they're playing against a defense that's more talented than it meets the eye.
Well, it's a great point and great context there. And I think what's interesting matchup-wise, before we sort of really go in on the defensive side of the ball, is where they have Division I talent coming in are the 2 areas that they can exploit UCLA the most, where UCLA has sort of looked the weakest the first 2 weeks. Where has UCLA looked weak? Offensive line, and then in pass coverage from time to time, right? Offensive line was very shaky against Bowling Green. Didn't really get tested last week. Pass coverage was phenomenal against Bowling Green, but then against Alabama State, that first 18, 20 minutes looked shaky. Now, when you overlay that to what South Alabama has in terms of Division I talent, you're talking about they bring it at the defensive line position, and then they bring it at the wide receiver position. So the matchups are actually working out really nicely for South Alabama going into this game. I think offensively, Will, in terms of matching up with South Alabama, I'm looking for a couple of things. One is I'm looking for more verticality in the pass game. And so I'm looking for more play action, more misdirection at the line of scrimmage, because what you really want to do there is you want to take that defense's aggressiveness and play it against them. So you want to do some misdirection. You want to play the screen game. You want them to sort of overcommit and get outside of their gaps and get outside of containment, and then use that play action to really start looking down the field. I think DTR, that's the one thing we have yet to see the first 2 weeks. And the optimist will say, well, Chip is, holding something back going into conference play, doesn't want to reveal all his cards. There's probably a lot of truth to that statement. A pessimist may say, well, have we really seen the jump in DTR now year 5? And so, putting both of those things together, that's what I'm really looking for. Is Charbonnet's now, 2 weeks without playing. He should be healthy and spry. I'm looking for a lot of zone reads on the edges. I'm looking for misdirection at the line of scrimmage, and I'm looking for play action and the screen game to really let that activity at the defensive line work against them.
And I think those are all great calls. We do need to open up the pass a lot more with DTR, because we saw variations of it last year. First 2 games, it hasn't been there this year. And I was really banking on that 5th-year jump. Obviously, we talked about this all offseason. He's not those guys, but the Baker Mayfields, the Burrows, you could see that jump in that 5th year. And I haven't seen it yet. I still got my fingers crossed. DTR is going to make that leap, when it comes to that first team all Pac-12. We threw out Dark Horse Heisman. I still have my hopes for that. He's going to get his chances to do that. So we are fired up about that. But Madman, we did this segment last week called Game Balls, where we gave out 6 games balls, 3 apiece. May not be 6, but I'm going to go 2. You're going to go 2.
Okay.
Players that need to play well for UCLA if they come away with the Rose Bowl, with a victory at home.
Starting with me?
Yes, sir.
I think we have to sort of acknowledge, given Major Applewhite, given kind of the offense, given Bradley feeling very comfortable first 2 weeks, given those receivers, I'm looking for Devin Kirkwood to have a really big game. And so I'm looking for pass deflections, kind of locking things up, maybe even a pick. This is, I think, the first maybe signature game of the Devin Kirkwood season. I'm really looking for that as my first game ball.
I think that's a phenomenal pick and some guy that I was targeting on my draft board for this particular segment. Devin Kirkwood, we have hyped up the star power this guy possesses. This is going to be a game where this is a pass-happy team, and they have the ability to beat you guys on the outside. This is where Kirkwood needs to start to shine if he's going to go on that trajectory like we all think he can. Kirkwood has got to lock it down on the left side of the field. I am going to go with a guy that we haven't seen a lot of in the first 2 games, but everything he's done has been, very solid in terms of the receiving game. Jake Bobo. I think I'm ready to unleash this guy out. It is time for us to see what Jake Bobo is capable of doing. I think he's got 4 catches. 3 of those have gone for first downs, in big situations. The first game of the season, it's 17-7. We need to get a first down on 3rd and 15. Jake Bobo hauls in a big-time first down to move the stick. So Bobo, he has the ability. He led the ACC in catches last year. This is the game where we got to let him out. We just got to see what Bobo is capable of in the receiving room. Madman, do you think Bobo is going to have a big day?
Absolutely, Will. And I think he is the linchpin now to let this team loose kind of offensively, because the other big weapon on the outside, obviously we know Charbonnet, is Kazmeir Allen. And Kazmeir Allen is an individual who Chip is going to really get involved, obviously, in that screen game, bubble screen game. And then eventually we want to see that speed work itself out through some verticality, some go routes, and really some deep balls. So Bobo is that intermediate receiver, that, 7 to 17 yards, 7 to 20 yards. That's Jake Bobo land. And when we're talking about DTR going through his progressions, adding some verticality to the pass game, we're not saying he's got to go run around, improv, and then just chuck it up to Kazmeir Allen. What we're really saying is looking beyond just the check down, going down the field, going on to those sticks, having those great out routes for first downs, a la Troy Aikman and Michael Irvin in those days, the Cowboys days in the 90s. That's what I'm really looking for Bobo. And Bobo is going to be the barometer. If Bobo has a big game, if Bobo is kind of 5+ catches, 80+ yards, a touchdown, UCLA is going to be just fine and cruising along. I think if Bobo is sub 50 yards, sub 3 catches, no touchdowns, that could be a proxy and a recipe that, hey, we may have a very competitive game on our hands. So I completely agree with you. This is now the guy as that complementary piece to Kazmeir Allen. Both those guys need to be humming for this UCLA offense to be what we know it can be and what it has shown in 2021.
I'm excited to get Kaz Allen back playing in this game because the last time we really saw a large sample size, 10 catches in week number 1. The big play is just the next play away with Kaz Allen. So very excited about him. Madman, you got your second selection and who you're excited about come tomorrow's big showdown against South Alabama. Who is it?
Thriller, we've got, sort of a group of folks that we can pick from. Obviously, Charbonnet is Charbonnet. It sort of goes without saying. He's at that stage now where you expect greatness from the Terminator. I think we've talked a lot about DTR and wanting to see that jump being made here game 3. And then when you look at the defensive side of the ball, obviously the Murphy twins and Carl Jones Jr. and Laiatu Latu have really demonstrated a lot of pressure on the quarterback at various times in the game. I'm so excited about that front 4 in particular in certain packages. But the guy I think, again, is going to need to have a big game, especially when you're talking about a quarterback in Bradley, an experienced receiving core, and a great coach in Applewhite, that quarterback of the defense, Darius Moasau. I'm looking for Moasau to have a 10+ tackle game. and really sort of manage that defense, be able to read and react to the variations that South Alabama brings, both with running the ball, with the short passing game, intermediate passing game, and so forth, and really putting his guys in a good position. I think this is the first game where defensively Muasau now has enough sort of meat on the bone in terms of the opponent, where now we can kind of see that prodigious talent that we have sort of come to expect as sort of a sleeper in the rest of the conference and the 120 plus tackle seasons that he's had at Hawaii. So I'm looking for Muasau to really have a big game and really make a stamp and an impression heading into conference season.
Excellent choice. And Muasau, this is the guy we recruited to come to UCLA from Hawaii. We need him to make the big stops, especially with a run game that as productive as South Alabama has been with a guy like Damian Baugh. It's going to be a fun little matchup. I love the linebacker against the best running back. Meet me on the edges. We'll make something happen. This is setting up to be something like that. LaDamian Webb going up against our Muasau, man. I'm excited to see what transpires on Saturday for that. Madman, there's a variety of different areas we can go with the last pick for who we're looking forward to. Raekwon O'Neal, I need to see it. Left tackle, he came from Rutgers, former All Big Ten honorable mention. He needs to ball out. We need to have that side of the field protected, especially for our quarterback, the most important position in football, maybe even sports as a whole. But the area I'm going to go with, and it's going to be kind of two different guys. And I bet you're thinking Will's going to go with Colson Yankoff, not who I'm going with, even though I would love to go with Yankoff. Tight end room has been very important to these two quarterbacks. So I'm going to go with a combination of Habermill or Carson Ryan. I don't know if Ezike is cleared for this game. I would love to see him back as he was very productive in the first game. But we need one tight end to go for over 50 yards, and really solidify a security blanket of what they've been, for the DTRs. Garbers last week, who was he going to more than just about anybody? It was Carson Ryan, the young freshman. So if one of those guys can really continue to make the dents that they make, whether it's Ryan, whether it's Habermill, whether it's Ezike if he plays, I feel very confident knowing that those guys can get open in the flat, because all we've seen is we have the deepest tight end room, maybe west of the Mississippi right now when it comes to what UCLA is able to bring to the table, Madman.
Well, no question about it. I think it's such a great point and so important, right? I mean, when you talk about the lineage from Caleb Wilson to Asiasi to then, of course, Mr. Greg Dulcich, and now kind of that next chapter, Carson Ryan really flashed a lot of brilliance last week, especially with that connection with Garbers. And then Habermill, he's the one who caught the long touchdown pass on that second drive after the Latu forced fumble. So I couldn't agree more. The way this offense is predicated on Chip really sort of continuing with those bunch formations with the tight end, going to play a critical role, no question about it. And Will, I think even if we zoom out a little bit, macro picture here, I'm really excited to see the Bruins' disposition going into this game. And I think this is where Chip Kelly, the coaching staff, I'm actually sort of looking at them to sort of see where is this team mentally at the start of this game. The problem when you have a couple of cupcakes to start and, that second game, you didn't play a ton of guys. Charbonnet didn't even play at all. That Bowling Green kind of second half feels like a distant memory. You just sort of wonder, has UCLA sort of hit his stride yet? And right now, maybe they're sort of still in, second gear right now, and they're kind of chilling and kind of working their way in, versus a South Alabama team that used the first two games of the season to work out all the kinks to play UCLA. This is their Super Bowl. This is their college football playoff. This is sort of their opportunity to really make history. So you have one team coming in that sort of had all eyes on this game. You have another team that's kind of working their way into the season a little bit. They know they've got a couple more games before that Washington game, that big Utah game. So I'm actually looking at the coaching staff. How ready is UCLA going to be early, or are they going to get, stunned a little bit with a quick drive or a quick score and then have to work their way in the game? So I'm really excited to look at that first 5, 7, 8 minutes of the game, because that's going to tell me a lot about the culture and the mindset of this team moving forward.
Yeah, and we cannot have that slow start that we had against Bowling Green. This team is way better than that Bowling Green team we played a couple weeks back. And, Madman, you stood up on the podium and you said this is the year UCLA is getting back to the Rose Bowl, right? So we got to see it this week. The South Alabama is a good team, but if we are as good as we potentially think UCLA is, it's got to be a 2 to 3 score game at the very least. If you are the Rose Bowl team, if you are going to get UCLA on a different level when they roll into the Big Ten and they're starting to get recruits from all over the country for you Bruin fans. Madman, thank you so much for coming on as always. Bruin Bible, we are going to have all the coverage. Make sure you're following our Twitters. We got them linked right below us. We're going to be doing live tweets
before we sign off.
Yes,
score.
Sir.
Any score prediction for you, my man?
I'm going to be optimistic about it. I think it's going to be closer in the first half, but 45-21 Bruins. That's my pick. I think we're going to win by 24. DTR is going to make some plays. Bobo is going to be a star of the show. And give me 130 for Charbonnet on the ground. That's my prediction, man. What do you think about that?
I love it. And, Will, you said it best earlier. I have full confidence, full faith, full expectation that this team is a 10-2 football team that is going to be threatening to play in that Pac-12 championship game and ultimately win the conference and go to their first Rose Bowl in 24 years. And having said all of the positive things about South Alabama, if you are that team, and I believe they are, not only do you have to win this game, you have to cover and you have to look convincingly. And so I believe I give South Alabama some respect defensively, but I really like this to be a 38-17, 3-touchdown UCLA victory.
And I love that too, man. As long as we're in that 3-score kind of window and up, I think that's a very, very solid win given the talent they have. And, man, I mean, coaching in football is so much more important than any other sport. They've got great coaches over there. So this is going to be a well-coached football team. Madman, we're going to have all the coverage for the LAFB coming to you tomorrow. Follow our Twitter accounts. Madman, like I said, doing the marathon across Los Angeles, hitting the Coliseum, hitting the Rose Bowl. I don't think it's ever been done before. So this guy is, we're going to have the Guinness Book of World Records staff on site for our boy Madman going around. Bruin Bible, we are out. Catch us this whole week.